Good day viewers, welcome to ML Tutorials. I would be speaking to sounds in English language. What we will be discussing today will be on English sounds, and particularly we'll be talking about consonant sounds. Don't forget that there are different types of sounds. We have the consonant sounds and we have the vowel sounds. Those are the two classes of sounds we have in English. Now, for the consonant sounds, we'll have to talk about the properties, the descriptions, and we'll talk about how they are produced. The production really matters a lot before you can be able to identify them or even distinguish one from the other. Now, let's begin with the number of consonant sounds we have in English language. Altogether, we have 24 consonant sounds. Out of the 44 sounds in English language, 24 are consonants. Now, hold on to that. We have 24 consonant sounds in English language. On the description of the consonant sounds, there are 3 parameters for describing consonant sounds in English language. So we'll pick them one after the other and then discuss them, and we should be able to say how these are practicable. Now, the first one I'll be talking about is the place of articulation. Place of articulation actually describes those organs that are responsible for the production of each sound. Each sound has its own peculiarities. You don't have the same way of pronouncing all the sounds, although there could be some similarities, like there will be some meeting points, but they can never be the same, in terms of these parameters. Now, the place of articulation, as I said earlier, describes those organs of speech that are responsible for the production of each sound. So this ranges from the lips, the teeth, tongue, the palate, which is the roof of the mouth, the velum, and the rest of them. We'll actually talk about them in the course of this lecture. The second one is the manner of articulation. So manner of articulation actually has to do with how these sounds are produced. Don't forget that the place has to do with those organs that are responsible. So now this manner of articulation has to do with how they are pronounced. Are they pronounced with certain obstruction, partial obstruction, full obstruction, like total obstruction, or they are produced with through the nose, through the mouth? Those are things we'll be discussing under manner of articulation. So the next one is state of the glottis defines the quality of the voice, whether it is voiced or it is voiceless, and this has to do with the vibration that occurs in the production of each sound. So we have a category that is voiced and the other category is voiceless. So how do we determine whether a sound is voiced or voiceless? This is actually going to be determined by the vibration that occurs while producing a sound. So in a way, some people would have to put their hand at the front of their mouth as they produce sounds. So once there is a kind of force, when you feel a force in your palm by the time you produce a sound, some people would say that is what defines, that is how to discover or detect a voiced sound. And in a way, some would say it has to do with the vibration that you feel in your throat. It's actually the two explanation, because by the time you produce a voiced sound, you discover that you have that feeling. There is usually a forceful hair coming out compared to the other pair. Their sounds are usually in pairs. You would have a voiced sound and you have a voiceless sound of the same category. For instance, let me pick the P and B. You discover that the two of them have almost the same description. The only point of divergence is that one is voiced and the other one is voiceless. So you discover that there is more effort in producing, you apply more effort in producing B than when you say P. So it's actually about the effort that you put in to the production of each of these sounds. So for the voiced, there is more effort and the vibration is much more than the other one, which is going to be described as a voiceless sound. Now let us go further. Now you will be hearing much of obstruction of air when you are describing sounds in English language. So obstruction of air will come up in terms of voiced and voiceless sounds, and it's usually about what I explained earlier, the efforts, the force of the air that you feel when you are producing each of these sounds. That is what defines the obstruction of air. So the obstruction can be within the mouth, the tongue blocking the air from flowing out freely. Sometimes it could be the lips, and then you could have a forceful release of the air. So that is what we refer to as obstruction. Sometimes the air would have to be released from the two sides of the tongue. Sometimes the tongue would block it and then eventually release it. It happens in different manners. So these are things that describe obstruction. Well, once you hear obstruction of air in the descriptions we'll be talking about. Now look at this. These are the organs of speech in general. So to every language you would have all of these organs in question. Now we have let me begin with the teeth. As you know, the teeth are very important in speech production. So the teeth help in regulating which sounds, they are very responsible for a lot of sounds. Like many of them are produced with the teeth, with the head of the teeth. Now the second one is the lips. We have the lips. Sometimes the two lips will be involved, and sometimes one of them would be involved to glide toward another organ of speech. We also have the alveolar ridge. Now the alveolar ridge is the part of the roof of the tongue that is immediately after the upper teeth. So when you use your tongue when you raise your tongue towards the back of the upper teeth, that part that your tongue will be touching, I mean the tip of your tongue, that part that the tip of the tongue will be touching immediately behind the upper teeth is what they call the alveolar ridge. That is the alveolar ridge. Then we have the nasal cavity. So the nasal cavity is above the mouth, and then it is actually responsible for some nasal sounds. So it is helpful in cases of nasal sounds, and these are sounds that are produced when the velum is lowered, and so the air that is supposed to come through the mouth then passes through the nose, and that is where we have nasal sounds. So the nose is also responsible for some of the sounds we have in English language. Then we have the palate. The palate is the roof of the mouth. So the palate is divided into two. We have the hard palate and we have the soft palate. So the hard palate is towards the front of the mouth, and you can actually practicalize this. You can use the tip of your tongue or even the body of your tongue, because the body of the tongue also touches the palate, the hard palate. So use your tongue to touch the roof of the mouth, and you discover that a part is soft and a part is hard. So towards the front of the mouth you have the hard palate, and then to the back we have the soft palate. Now raise the back of your tongue towards the hard palate. You discover that you have the soft palate behind. We also have the oral cavity, and that is towards the back of the mouth too. Then we have the velum. So I mentioned the velum the other time when I was talking about the nasal cavity. The velum is responsible for nasal sounds, and that is what makes it possible for us to have nasal sounds, because if the velum is not lowered, there is no how we can have nasal sounds. So when the velum is raised, then the air that is coming from the lungs would come out through the mouth, but once it is lowered, the air would then come out through the nasal cavity, and those are the functions of the velum, lowering and lifting of itself to produce the nasal sounds and the oral sounds. Then we have the pharynx, which is also towards the throat. We have the root, we have the body of the tongue. So the tongue itself has a lot of functions, because the tongue can be raised towards the back to produce a palate, sounds that are headed by the palate and the tongue, sometimes towards the teeth, sometimes towards the alveolar ridge, and a lot of other functions that are performed by the tongue. So these are the okay. We also have the larynx, the vocal cord, and that is where you usually have the vibration. So these are the organs that are responsible for speech production in all languages. So, but in particular, we are discussing this in relation to English sounds. So we'll go back to place of articulation, and then we'll talk about each category we have under place of articulation. The first one we have here is the bilabial sounds. Bilabial sounds. So what is bilabial? From the word bilabia, we can derive two words. We have the bi, which is actually about two. Wherever you have bi, you have two. Then we have labial. Labial is another word for the lips. So that means we are talking about two lips, the engagement of the two lips in the production of sounds. So for the two lips, the two of them would come together to produce sounds. Now, let's see some of the examples we have here. We have the pa, pa, pa. Then we have b, b. The next one is m, m. And we have w. So if you look at all of them, you can try to produce them on your own. You discover that the two lips definitely come together to produce each of them. P, b, m, and w. So these four sounds are the bilabial sounds in English language. We also have the alveolar sounds. Alveolar. So these are sounds that are produced with the tip of the tongue touching the alveolar ridge. So don't forget that we have the alveolar ridge in the organs of speech that we discussed earlier. So the alveolar is actually the one, the roof of the mouth that is directly behind the upper teeth. So once you have the tip of the tongue touching that alveolar ridge, you'll be having the alveolar sounds. For example, we have sounds like t, d, n, l, z, and r. So if you produce all of these sounds, you discover that your tip of the tongue or the tip of your tongue would glide towards the alveolar ridge. I mean, that part, you know, the roof of the mouth that is immediately behind the upper teeth. Next is the labiodental sounds. Labiodental sounds. So what do we mean by labiodental? The other time we defined labial. Labio is from labia. So we have labio, which is defining lip, a lip, because there is no bi here. So we have a lip, and then we have dental, which means the teeth. So labio and dental means the lip and the teeth. So which lip and which teeth? So we are talking about the upper teeth and the lower lip. The two of them would come together to produce the labiodental sounds. So now let us look at the sounds that are under this category. We have the and we have and so the two of them are the labiodental sounds, and by the time you practicalize it, you will discover that you have the two organs, I mean the upper teeth and the lower lip, coming together to produce sounds. We have the dental sounds too. The dental sounds are mainly produced with the tip of the tongue blocking the free flow of air by gliding with the upper teeth. So air, again, we have the issue of obstruction of air, because the blocking of air is actually an obstruction. So for dental sounds, the air would not come out freely. No, it won't. It will be blocked. It will be obstructed by the tongue, the tip of the tongue, and then the air would be released later. Then if you want to produce this sound, That's sometimes they used to emphasize. We have examples like and the. The two of them are actually th spellings. I take it again, and the. So the other sign is the zero with a cross in between, and then the second one, which is a voiced the, is like a D with a crossing on the stick of the D. So you have the two of them as the sounds under the dental sound. We have the palatal sounds. They are sounds that are produced with the body of the tongue raised to the roof of the mouth. So when you have a sound that is produced when, by the raising of the tongue, the body of the tongue at that, because it is not just the tongue. Like I said earlier, the tongue performs a lot of functions. Different part of the tongue performs different functions. So in the case of palatal, you would have the body of the tongue being raised towards the roof of the mouth, and that is towards the hard palate. Don't forget that we also described the different part of the hard palate. Of the palate, we have the hard palate, we have the alveolar ridge, and we have the soft palate. So in the case of palatal, you would have the body of the tongue being raised towards the hard palate. Now, what example do we have here? We have J. So J is actually written as J, and wherever you have strides before and after an alphabet, it has turned to a sound. It is no more an alphabet, it has become a sound. So in the case of J, you would see that the spelling is like that of J, but when it turns to sound, it becomes J. So you cannot use your knowledge of alphabet to produce this particular sound when it gets to sounds in English language. The next one is palato-alveolar. They are sounds that are produced with the tongue touching the hard palate and the tip of the tongue touching the alveolar ridge. So now the tongue is performing two functions here with its different parts. The tip of the tongue will be touching the alveolar ridge, and that is why you have alveolar as part of the term. And then you have the body of the tongue raised to the palate. So the body of the tongue and the tip of the tongue will be raised. One will be touching the hard palate, and the other one will be touching the alveolar ridge. So let us look at the examples we have there. We have the sh, we have the ju, we have the ch, and the j. So these are the examples of sounds we have under palato-alveolar sounds. The next one is velar. The velar sounds are sounds that are produced at the back of the tongue, thus allowing the back of the tongue to be raised to the soft palate or the velum. So when you are producing velar sounds, the back of the tongue or the velum will be raised. They will be raised, and then the hair that is coming from the lung will come out. They are actually sounds that are produced at the back of the mouth. So examples are k, g, and ng. So you can see that the three sounds are produced at the back of the mouth, all of them. And in the production of these sounds, the velar would be raised, the velum will be raised, and so there is no flow of air coming out through the nostril, through the nasal cavity. So all of them will be oral sounds. We also have the glottis. The glottis sounds are produced with the larynx, which consists the vocal cords. So these are the sounds we have under place of articulation. Next one is the manner of articulation. Manner of articulation defines how the air escapes from the vocal cord. So is the air fully obstructed or partially obstructed? Does it escape freely? Does it escape immediately? Is it a free flow? Is there no obstruction? Those are questions that should be raised when you are discussing manner of articulation. Then under this we have the first one we'll be discussing is the plosive sounds. The plosive sounds are produced with total obstruction of air in the vocal tract. So when you hear plosive, it has to do with total or complete obstruction. So in the course of producing such sounds, there is going to be a sudden release, like an outburst of the blocked air. And when you have a sudden release of the air, there is going to be a vibration, and that is why they are otherwise called stop. Now examples are p, b, t, d, k, and g. I take them again. P, b, t, d, k, and g. So these are the plosive sounds. Fricative sounds. The next one is fricative. The fricative sounds are produced with partial closure or partial obstruction of the vocal cord, coupled with a slow and continuous release of air. So like the plosive that would engage, that involves total obstruction and then sudden release of the air. For the fricative, you have a partial obstruction or partial closure, and then when the air that is partially obstructed is about to be released, it is going to be slowly, the air would be released slowly, and the air would continue to be, a continuous release. And that is why in some cases you can stress those sounds. For instance, we have sounds like sh, we have the, we have v, z, ha, and j. So you can see that all of them have partial obstruction, but in the long run you have the air that is obstructed being released gradually. The next one is affricate. Affricate sounds are produced with total obstruction of air in the vocal tract, but the air is gradually and slowly released like the fricatives. So we have examples like ch and j. These two sounds are the examples of affricate sounds. The next one is the nasal sounds. Nasal sounds are produced when the velum is lowered to allow free flow of air through the nasal cavity. Now, I explained the other time that nasal sounds engage the velum, and how they engage the velum is that the velum would be lowered. So instead of allowing the air that is coming from the lungs to come out freely, it would then find its way through the nose, and that is what the velum, that is the role the velum plays in the production of nasal sounds. So you cannot separate nasal sounds and velum. They have, they work together. Now the examples we have here are m, n, and ng. So these are the three sounds we have under nasal sounds. We also have lateral. Lateral sounds are produced with obstruction of air at the center of the mouth, but when the air is about to be released, lateral sounds, we have just one of them, and that is l. So if you look at the way l is produced, you discover that the tongue is somehow twisted, like twisted upward, and then the air coming from the lungs would not be allowed to come out from the front of the mouth. Instead, it would be released from both sides of the tongue. The tongue must have been twisted, and because of the twist, the air would not be able to come out of the front of the mouth. It would then come out through the two sides of the tongue, and that is what makes the lateral sound. So basically, the free flow of air would be obstructed from coming out of the front of the mouth. Rather, you would have it coming out from the two sides, and that is what defines the lateral sound. Then we have the approximant. The approximant sounds are also called semi-vowels, and the reason why they call them semi-vowels is because there is no obstruction of air at all. They are freely produced, and examples of sound under this category are y and w, y and w. So the two of them are the two examples we have in approximants. We also have the retroflex approximants. They are sounds that are produced with partial closure at the center but with vibration between the articulators and the place of articulation. So the example is actually the r sound, which is produced at the back of the mouth. And now we move on to the state of the glottis. State of the glottis. This is the third parameter for describing consonant sounds in English language. So it's either you have a voiced sound or you have a voiceless sound under the state of the glottis. So the voiced sound now, like I said earlier when I was introducing consonant sounds, sounds produced when the two vocal cords are tightly close to each other are what we call the voiced sound. We call them voiced sound because there is going to be a forceful release of air and a vibration in the oral cavity. Don't forget that the oral cavity is just around the neck, and that is why I was saying when I started the lecture that some people would judge by putting their hand on their neck to feel the vibration there. So when the vibration is much, you would tag the sound a voiced sound, but when it is not so much compared to its peer, you tag it a voiceless sound. So let us see some of the sounds, in fact all of them, we have all of them here, sounds that are voiced in English. So we have the b, v, the, z, j, g, m, n, l, r, ng, w, and j. So these are the voiced sounds in English language. The other category is the voiceless sounds. So the voiceless sounds would be realized when the two vocal cords are resting apart to allow free flow of air through the trachea, and it is going to be possible without, because there won't be any vibration in the course of producing these sounds. So the trachea would not allow for any vibration during the course of producing the voiceless sounds, and it's actually because the two vocal cords are not together. They are not, they are resting apart, and so the vibration would not be there. So let us see the sounds that are not voiced sounds, the voiceless sounds. We have p, t, s, sh, ch, k, ha, and y. So these are the voiceless sounds in English. So let's look at the consonant charts. Having said all, you will notice that everything I mentioned is here on the consonant chart. Look at the terms you have on the topmost part of the table. You have a place of articulation, and you can see that every explanation I made is geared towards the explanation of each of these terms, from bilabial to labiodental, dental sounds, alveolar, palato-alveolar, palatal, velar, and glottal. And then to the left hand side you have manner of articulation, where you have stop and plosive are the same. So you have stop or plosive, you have fricative, affricate, nasal, lateral approximants, retroflex approximants, and glide. Then below you have a state of the glottis, where you have voiceless as the light one, and then voiced as a shaded one. So voice sounds, so sounds you have on the right hand side, with dark shades are the voiced sounds. The one on the left hand side without any shade are the voiceless sounds. So you can say that these are the description of each sound. Now let us pick them one after the other and describe them. For instance, I'll just pick a few of them and give you the description. Let's pick the first one. We have P. So P is a plosive bilabial voiceless sound. So if you want to describe P, you would have three qualities now: stop or plosive, bilabial, and then voiceless consonant sound. For B, you would have stop or plosive, bilabial, voiced sound. Then let's pick another set. We have F and V. For F, we have a fricative, labiodental, voiceless sound. And then for V, we have fricative, labiodental, voiced sound. Let's go to another category. I'm taking S and Z. For this, we have S as fricative, alveolar, voiceless sound, and then Z as fricative, alveolar, voiced sound. So that is how to go about it. And lastly, let's pick the last one. I'm picking M. For M, we have nasal, bilabial, voiced sound. So that is how to go about it. Thank you so much for listening and watching this video. Please, if you like this video, don't forget to click on the button below, the button that shows a bell. That is how to subscribe to this channel, so that you can always get notifications for the next video. Please also try as much as possible to click on like, and you may also send your comments in by writing in the comment section. You can send in your observation, your comments, and things you feel we can improve on. Thank you so much. Bye.